Hey y'all, it's
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a continuation on my series on James, the book. I don't know, it's called the Book of James, also the letter of James. That's not really the point. I gotta say, James chapter 3 is my favorite chapter in the letter/book. So I'm excited for today's video. To that end, I was thinking about it while I was preparing for it, and I decided that I should probably write down my notes and thoughts ahead of time so I can have them during the video. I wrote them down in my blue journal for writing, because you guys should see my video on actual journaling later. I wrote down my thoughts on what I wanted to say, some pointers and stuff, just to be more prepared, you know? So I thought that was a good idea. As always, I'll be reading from my ESV Bible, my lovely, kind of battered but still very well loved ESV Bible, and I put the link for it if you'd like to buy it so we can be Bible buddies in the description box for my video on chapter 2. So if you want to check that out later, you can go do that, but for now stick around because we're gonna start the video. And lastly, before we start, I wanted to apologize because my setup for my videos have been kind of inconsistent recently, just because I've been trying to discover, you know, like what spot I like best. And I think for now, I like this. It suits what I need, you know, I get good lighting and everything. So let's get started. As I've been doing in my last 2 videos, I'll read from my Bible. You guys can read along, or I'll have the words on the screen. So if you guys want to watch there as well, then that's great. You can just listen to me talk. And usually that would sound pretty narcissistic, like you can just listen to me talk, but literally that's what you're doing right now. You're just listening to me talk, so it's not gonna make a big difference. Anyways, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. So it's not condemning teachers in this passage, I don't think, or discouraging anyone from becoming one, but it's warning us about the responsibility that comes with being in a position of spiritual leadership. Because I don't know, you could be a pastor or a discipleship leader, or you could just be mentoring someone. When you take that responsibility into your hands and say, I'm gonna be the one who's gonna explain the things from above, the things of the Bible to you, then you kind of have an extra responsibility to teach it the right way, because if you don't, you're gonna lead that person into sin. So yeah, like no extra pressure, but it's something to keep in mind if you're considering going into that kind of position, which is why what I'm doing now, I wouldn't call this a position of leadership, but I do have a platform that I'm using to talk to you guys about this, about the gospel. I also have to be careful and discerning in what I share with you guys. I can only share from my experiences and the truth that is like solidly in the Bible, so I have to be careful in what I tell you guys to make sure I'm not saying anything that will lead anyone into the wrong thinking train. Then verse 2 talks about someone who's able to control what they say. I think what it's saying is that it doesn't completely redeem the person, because we're also... My neighbors are yelling outside. I'm very sorry. I live in a very dynamic community, so just bear with me if you hear them again. So I think what it means is that we're all susceptible to sin, and each one of us struggles with our own kind of sin. So I don't think it's saying you're going to be completely rid of your sin, but I think that the sin of the body is greatly lessened when you're able to have self-control in your speech and what you say, because a lot of the times what you say, what comes out of your mouth, is what leads you to physical sin or others into different kinds of sin. That's what verse 2 is talking about. Let's keep going. If we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. They are so large and are driven by strong winds. They are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. Okay, so for any of you who may not know, I don't know why you wouldn't know this, but I don't know. A bit, it's a metal piece. It's really small and it goes into the harness thingy that goes on a horse's mouth so that you can control where the horse is going by pulling on the thing that's attached to the other thing that's attached to the bit. I'm not a horse girl, so I don't know these things. And a rudder, it's a wooden piece. It kind of acts like a steering wheel. It kind of directs which way the ship is going from the back. And it's a very small piece of wood. Sometimes we don't even notice small details, things like that. But in the same way, our tongue is something that its size does not measure up to the damage that it can do, the enormity of sin and conflict that it can cause with our speech. That's why the analogies are the analogies that they are. So these small tools, despite their size, they have so much strength. This strength allows them to provide direction to whatever the vehicle that contains them is, whether it's a horse or a ship or a human. Vehicle's not the right word, but and so the direction in question can lead to unity or to destruction. That's why it's so important to recognize the power of speech. And I could just stop right there, but I'm not going to. I'm gonna explain that a little bit. I think all of us have experienced at some point a speech or a conversation or someone talking to you, and you just felt like what they had to say was either so motivational and it was gonna change the way you live, or maybe it was really discouraging. You always think about it and it's constantly bringing you down, which unfortunately happens, I think, more than words of encouragement. And that's because it's kind of in our nature to tear each other down and to be discouraging. It's part of our fallen selves. It's kind of programmed in us, which is why encouragement and words of uplifting words take more discipline, and the result ultimately is much better, obviously, than discouraging words. So yeah. How great is the forest set ablaze by such a small fire? And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, straining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by him. Wow, that was a heavier analogy. Is it getting hot in here? Is it just me? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, first realize is that this is metaphorical, so it's not saying your tongue is literally on fire. I mean, sometimes it do be feeling like that with some Chipotle and stuff, but it's usually not actually on fire, so don't take it literally, metaphorically, okay? That being said, let me say I don't think the tongue is inherently evil, because if it were, God wouldn't have made us with tongues or the ability to speak. We have corrupted that gift that we have, the gift to speak, the gift of speech, by using our words to tear other people down and to exalt ourselves. So I guess basically what I'm trying to say is that no, the tongue isn't inherently evil, but because of sin, our instinct is to be destructive or hurtful in what we say. No one wants to be like that on purpose. I mean, maybe some really bitter people, but for the most part, we're not trying to be like that on purpose, but we do be like that. So that's why we have to make it our responsibility, especially as believers, to train ourselves not to have that kind of speech. Criticism, slander, they can cause damage in our relationships. The words that you choose when they're criticism, okay, destructive criticism, because constructive criticism is something that everybody needs a healthy dose of. Destructive criticism or judgmentalness, hurtful words, those being hurtful words, they hurt. There's always another alternative in the way that you can talk to someone. We have to be careful not to be choosing those kinds of words. Because of that, I believe that it's by having discernment in what we say that we can learn how to live in love and peace for our neighbor, which is something that we're commanded to do anyway. Let's keep reading. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. Okay, once again, not legit. You ain't a snake or none physically, so your tongue is not full of poison. It's full of some other stuff, but not poison, okay? So it's not being literal. The words that you choose, if they're to tear other people down or to lie or to slander, that's comparable to poison, because what does poison do? It kills you physically. What do deconstructive words do? Kill your spirit over time. See? We were created by God to be able to tame animals. And I'd say that for the most part, we've done a pretty good job of doing that. But we aren't capable of controlling our speech on our own, and we need God's help to do that. Why? Because we are impulsive creatures. We don't always think about our actions before we do them. Because when you do something without thinking about how that's going to affect other people. So your speech, if you see it in the light of the wild creature animal thing, you can see how it's that whole thing of not being able to take back the things you say. You know, sometimes you feel like your words are just tumbling out of your mouth and you can't stop them. That's what this is talking about. It's saying you don't have this ability to control your speech naturally. It doesn't come to you by nature. You need God's help doing that, and that's why we ask him for discernment, we ask him for wisdom, and we ask him for self-control, which is one of the fruits of the Spirit, along with love, which is something that we should have for people, which is why I'm doing this video in the first place. So let's keep going. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water. Okay, well maybe you know where I'm going with this, how I'm gonna apply this to today's day and age. I think this is very clearly applicable to the current situation of the world, you know, in the face of adversity and injustice, a lot of discrimination going on, and racial tension, and just tension between people in general. We believers are called to love everyone, we know this. In spite of our differences, both within the church and out of the church, there are always gonna be things that people don't agree on and things that we don't see eye to eye on, and that's okay. We are called to love everyone regardless, because Christ loved us. That's literally why we can love everyone, is because Christ loved us first. If we say that we know and love the Lord, there can't be any room for hatred in our hearts, hatred towards others, towards ourselves, and towards the Lord. We don't have room for that in our hearts, because God, he didn't make us to be that way, but then we chose to be that way. But then Christ redeemed us so that we don't have to be that way. That was a lot. People are made in the likeness of God, as this passage says, and so we're in no position to discriminate and divide based on our own judgments, which means that the things that we say can't be honoring to God and, how do you say not downpouring, as these analogies explain about, you know, the trees not being able to bear something other than the kind of tree that it is, or that a freshwater spring can't produce salt water. A heart that's truly seeking God's holiness can't speak curses on their neighbor while claiming to love the Lord, for all the reasons I already explained. So just to refresh, because of water, no, refresh. Loving God means learning to love your neighbor and the people around you, and the things that you say, and the way that you think about them, and the way you act. And that's all, period. Just kidding, there's more, so let's keep going. Who is wise and discerning among you? By his good conduct let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly and unspiritual. Alright. So, you know, this is another of those more well, I don't know how controversial, but I feel like it might be a little bit, so I wanted to shed some light on this, don't be testing me right now, on this verse. So, I think it's saying that wise people understand that humility is essential to living a godly life. So a wise person, a person who's truly wise in the Lord, they're not going to be like, hey, yo, look at me, I'm wise, I'm like King Solomon up in here, King David or whatever. No, the wisest people are the people that you barely hear, that aren't constantly talking about their wisdom. I'm not saying that they're quiet people, I'm just saying they don't talk about how wise they are all the time, because they understand that wisdom is something that comes with humility, and that's an attribute of being wise. Because of that, if it's genuine, others will see and follow their example of withholding their words, because they see the good effects of that, and how much having discernment in your speech helps you become a wiser person, because one thing leads to the other. But when we are consumed by our pride, our speech will reflect a selfish heart. So when you're trying to tell people about how smart you is, how wise you is, how knowledgeable you is, you ain't being wise at all, because you're telling people, look at me, look how great I am. Once again, very dynamic living space. What was I saying? That's the opposite of what wisdom really means is that you're not going around telling people how wise you is. And that's a root of a selfish heart, because you want that attention for yourself, you want that recognition, and you're not pointing it back to God. So here we can determine the difference between knowledge and wisdom, between the words that point to God's sovereignty and those that point to ourselves, the ones that point to how good we are, how good we think we are as individuals. We should be pointing to the things that we see God has taught us in our lives, and that's the facts. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and of good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. The first thing I want to point out about this is that you guys will notice the first and utmost importance was placed on purity, meaning wisdom from God is free of darkness, free of sin, completely and wholly, entirely coming from God and from no other source, no other place. It is then peaceable, open to reason, full of mercy and of good fruits, impartial and sincere. Read it again. Peaceable, open to reason, full of mercy and of good fruits, impartial and sincere. Y'all better write that down, put it up in your wall, and say, this is my guide to life. No, I'm just kidding. It's not the guide to living a godly life. But in the speech that you have, in the way that you train yourself to talk, it's a pretty good guide to having godly conversations, godly speech, and godly words. We learn to educate ourselves, becoming wise in the world and knowledgeable in the world. Let me explain the difference here. You become wise in the things of the Word, which means you study the Bible and you learn how to reflect the things that you learn about the Lord and His character in what you say and how you speak. You become knowledgeable in the things of the world so that you know how to talk about the things that are happening in the world from a godly perspective. Did that clear things up for you? I hope it did, because I try my best, okay? And most importantly, it teaches us to control our speech with, I was gonna say determination, but it's discernment, so that we can build each other up and radiate the love that God has for us to the rest of the world, because that is the path to wisdom, to true wisdom. I think that wisdom starts from the way that you speak and the words that you choose to use or choose not to use in this case. And we're gonna stop right about here. So if you guys enjoyed, like this video and leave a comment. Like I've been asking, if you guys have any recommendation for the next book in the New Testament that I should do a series on, let me know, because I'd love to have suggestions on what to do the next series on. And I think that's mostly it. Follow me on Instagram, here it is, and I hope you guys have a wonderful, blessed rest of the day. And yeah, so yeah, that's all. Love you guys. Peace out, and y'all see me in the next video. Bye. Hey y'all, it's